All right. Good morning, sixth graders. It's Monday, April 27th, and we're going to get into Aristotle for today here. He's going to be our focus of study, our philosopher. Just really quickly, I do want to remind you that by noon today, your final draft of your narrative will be due. And if you're doing it on paper, you obviously need to have that along with your materials that you're turning in so that I can take a look at it. Okay. So if you're not done with that and you're watching this video right now, I highly recommend you just stop what you're doing and get that done, because this is not going to have anything that's actually required. I mean, you are going to take notes, and if you have a quiz later on, which you will next week, and you have a question about Aristotle, you're going to need to have these notes done, but there isn't anything that you're actually going to be submitting besides your warm-up and your exit ticket today, okay? So if you're not done with your final draft, back out, go do that, come back, okay? This is not due, and if you need to take a little bit just to catch up, that's totally fine, okay? That being said, let's head on into it. Hope it was a good weekend, by the way. I don't know what the weather's going to be like when I'm filming this, but I am pulling for it. All right, so you should have a note packet. I want to just quickly go to the classwork for today. You should have a note packet that's in paper. I think it's easier to do it on paper for this, but I mean, if you really want to, you can download it and you could print it off. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do, but I think just for notes, doing it in the paper packet is so much easier. It's going to be right here. It's going to look like this. Now, there might be a slide or two extra in the video, and that's because I wanted to get it to fit onto 2 pages, but all the key ones are on there, and you should be following along, okay? Now, if you can't find it yet, hit pause on the video, find it, and then you can resume it when you're ready to go. Okay. So this title slide obviously is not going to be in your notes because you don't need it. But Aristotle, and I love this little quote or this concept that knowledge comes from experience, because this is where Aristotle is going to be different than the other people that we've talked about beforehand. Now, Socrates, where is his knowledge going to come from? It's going to be from asking questions, right? That's what he believes derives or creates true knowledge, is questioning everything. And Plato is going to be similar, but for him, knowledge comes from thought. The idea that if we use our brain and we use our logical reasoning, we should be able to completely on our own figure out any truth that we need, okay? Now, Aristotle doesn't necessarily disagree with either of those things. He thinks questioning and using your reasoning is important, but he believes that reasoning is going to come from things that you are going to experience. In other words, experience is the teacher. What you see, what happens to you, and what you see happening to others, that's what's going to cause true knowledge to be gained over time. And he takes a very, very scientific approach to that, right? A lot of you just got done with your science projects, and that should make perfect sense, right? In order for you to understand exactly what's going on in there, you are experiencing or doing an experiment that you are creating or logging your observations on to draw a conclusion, right? That's pretty much spot on what this guy was all about. Okay, so this is a note slide for you. So he's going to be born in 384 to 322 BCE. Remember, we're before 0, so we're counting down in the years. He is going to be born in Macedonia. And if you know Macedonia and you know those years, you'll know that that is in the time of Philip II and Alexander the Great. Now, Aristotle, which comes from the word aristocracy, so yeah, his family was very, very powerful and wealthy. He's going to be the son of a prominent physician, which is another word for a doctor. So he, although it's not proven, a lot of people believe that he was given an education in being a medical doctor first, and then he kind of branched out into like many, many, many other fields. But it makes sense that he has that scientific approach being a doctor, and then he tries to apply that into a lot of other fields. So that makes sense to me. He was Plato's student, right? Plato Socrates student. Aristotle, he's Plato's finest student. This is a picture of the two of them standing next to each other at the academy, Plato's school. And he went and studied at a very young age. It's kind of weird in that regard. You could almost draw a really, really strong parallel to Plato and Socrates, right? Now, even though he did become his most important student and was definitely one of the brightest, they butt heads a lot. And we see that in a lot of Plato's dialogues and some of the things that the writings, not necessarily they come out and like fight and say like, I don't like this guy, but like their attitudes and philosophies on how they think about things are very different. But they both respected each other, and they both knew that they were very, very, very intelligent people, probably the smartest people of those time periods. Now, we kind of talked about this already, but Plato is going to say that to understand the world, all you need to do is point up to your noggin, right? If you can think about these abstract, tough ideas, you can figure them out. Now, Aristotle would say maybe you can use your brain, but in order to figure it out, let's look at the world. The world has this intricate system of how everything is set up, right? So if we can experience the world, especially through nature, he was big into nature, we can understand how the world works simply by experiencing it and watching it. Definitely scientist. So he eventually is going to branch out, start his own school. He's going to call it the Lyceum. And it's going to be like a direct competitor with the academy, right? He is going to try to get people to attend his school over Plato's. Now, it's very successful. It is named after the god Apollo. And Apollo, among a lot of other things, he was the sun god. And the sun, obviously, is what causes nature to be able to thrive and exist, right? And I think that's why he calls it that, because the Lyceum is actually going to be almost completely done outside, because Aristotle would say, well, what better way for us to understand what's going on in these concepts I'm talking about if we can go out and experience it in nature, and I can use it as an example during that time. Now, in the morning, there was 2 different lectures. So the serious ones would be for like the students that are actually attending. And then the evening ones are going to be anybody who wants to can attend. And that's also something that is directly different than the academy, because Plato only had a select group of people go there, because remember, he was into the idea of a philosopher king, and he would think that only certain people should be able to get an education. Aristotle did not believe that. Now, eventually, Philip II sees how incredibly intelligent Aristotle is. He also begins to notice that the Lyceum is thriving, and he wants to pay him to tutor his young son, Alexander. And he does. And he provides Alexander with basically one-on-one education from a very young boy to when he was about 18 to 19 years old. And as we know, that's right around the time that Philip dies, and then Alexander rides out. Now, can you give Aristotle all of the credit? No, but I definitely think that there has to be something said that such an important man mentors an important child, and then that child goes on to do things that we're still talking about 2,600 years later, right? Well, maybe not 2,600, 2,400. Still a long time ago, right? There has to be a connection there between the education that he got and what Alexander was able to achieve. Now, we don't have too many things that are surviving of Aristotle anymore. And in fact, most of the things that we see that are surviving today are probably lecture notes. And it could have been students' notes as well. They were just all combined into one collection or a few collections. But he really, what we talk about today in terms of his impact really doesn't matter about his written works. It's more so his opinions on certain fields of study like math, science, philosophy, obviously, psychology, politics. There's so many different things. And his approach and his belief into studying these fields is what we really are focusing on with his impact to the world today. Okay. And he is really going to try to develop a system of philosophy, right? A written, documented, set philosophy on how the world works. Okay, and he's going to use that through logic, which we've already heard from Plato and Socrates, right? But where we start to change is what we call empirical evidence. And what empirical evidence simply is you are taking evidence from something that you're studying and you're applying it to a conclusion. Okay. Now, if you're able to do this and you can take this logic and apply it to evidence and it comes out to be true, obviously your thought process was correct. Now, if you try it and it doesn't work, well, then obviously your thought process was wrong, but you've still learned, right? Like if you came up with a hypothesis for your science fair project and you were wrong, that doesn't mean that you fail, right? That just means that you got a different conclusion than what you originally thought. And now you know that for the future, right? So, oh, shoot. That's disappointing. Here. I got to change. We'll pull this up. Sorry about that. Golden mean's important. We got to talk about that because that's what your exit ticket's about. So we will get to that. My humblest apologies. I will fix that for when we actually are sending this out. Okay. Because this should be in your notes. Yep. Perfect. Okay. So the golden mean. Okay. This is a chart of what the golden mean is. I'm going to go back here so that you can take your notes really quick. Why don't you pause this so that you can get your notes down, and then we'll move through it pretty quick. But what Aristotle believed is that in every personality trait, there was what we call a golden mean. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be the right amount of being a mean person. That's not it. If you know the math term, the mean, what a mean is a what? It's an average, right? So in each personality trait, there's going to be a negative side where you have too little of it, and there's a negative side where you have too much of it, okay? And the hope is that you are able to find the middle ground of both of those extremes, okay? Now, he also believed, and the video that's going to be optional that's attached to this, it talks about this. He thinks that relationships, like lifelong, like love relationships, should be for people that have different sides of the spectrum so that they can kind of develop each other's skills to get close to this golden mean or this balance. So what am I talking about? So let's say for right here, oh, this is a great one. So we have, that's actually really, really tough. Here we go. So for bravery, okay? Now, if you have too little of it, you're considered a coward, right? But also, if you have too much bravery, you could be what's considered rash or arrogant, right? Like, I'm so confident and I'm so brave that I'm going to run out across the street even though I see an 18-wheeler coming right at me, right? Doesn't matter how brave you are. That's still going to cause a serious problem for you when you get hit by that 18-wheeler, right? So the idea is that you need to have courage where you have a little bit of bravery, but then it's not crossing over to getting you into trouble, right? And he has a list of many, 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 many different personality traits where we need to try to find that middle. And he believes that if you can do that as much as possible, not only are you going to realize your full potential, but you're also going to have a much happier life. I'm really sorry about that chart. I don't know why that happened. I just looked at that the other day and it didn't do that. All right, and logic, right? He's going to believe in logic as a means to apply it to what we see, right? So we believe that either a statement is true or false. We are going to use our logical reasoning based on our observations, and we're either going to be able to prove that it's true through our reasoning, or we might find out that it's false. And the way that he does that is through what we call syllogisms. Now, we will definitely cover these in your 8th grade year. Mr. Gruch will, if he's still teaching the class at the time. They talk about syllogisms a lot in Trivium 3. But basically what you're doing here is you're using your logical reasoning to come up to a conclusion based on what we call two premises, okay? So here's a major premise, something that people believe to be universally true, right? All men are mortal, which means you're going to die, okay? So, and here's a minor premise. We're going to try to attach it to this one. So Socrates is a man, Well, if all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, therefore, if the conclusion is right, that would mean Socrates is mortal, that he will die. Well, we know that actually happened, but also just through our own basic logic skills, we can assume that to be correct. Now, sometimes people will use syllogisms where the logic doesn't work out, right? And there are many other ways that Aristotle is going to be somebody who's going to apply these syllogisms, not just in a basic concept like this. But ladies and gentlemen, if there's really one thing that I can hit on with Aristotle, it's that thinking about things is not enough. You need to apply things in order to actually prove them to be true. Because in his mind, if you're spending all of this time just coming up with these ideas, how can you prove that it's right without putting it into a specific scenario, right? There is an argument to be made that not only is Aristotle important, he really is the one that creates the idea of science. So you can tell Mr. Lamprecht that if you'd like, but that's really going to be our main focus on talking about Aristotle, okay? My fiance just got home. My dog's whimpering a little bit, so I'm sorry about that. But that's all I have for you today. Remember, nothing is actually due from this besides getting the notes done, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.